welcome. There's a therapist who is quite well known who has worked a lot with couples. It's one of her specialties, and she's really renowned for really getting in there and getting back to the core wounds and unwinding all the stress that's built up over the years and all that stuff. And she's now much older. And recently she said how sometimes when she's with a couple, she certainly does that work. But sometimes she said, I just tell them, watch a movie tonight, drink some wine, eat some popcorn. And I love that. Those are just really wise words. Sometimes in life you need to lean in and do that deeper dive, unwind what's between you and feeling free. But sometimes you really need to lean back. You need to just relax and let yourself renew and replenish. And determining the difference between the two, that's your path. And I'm personally fascinated by what it means to develop that intuitive sense that guides you. That sense of deep inner listening to sense what's most enlivening. Sometimes we're drawn to doing, sometimes we're drawn to simply being. But that inner listening is really juicy stuff. So I wanted to share some thoughts on the art of self-healing. And specifically what I'd like to talk about is first, as I often do in 4 parts. The first part, the importance of being really honest about what's stressing you. The second is to explore the importance of looking directly at the source of that stress. The third is developing the art of investigation, which is kind of a lifelong study. How do you be with? How do you investigate what's arising? And fourth, I'd like to talk a little bit about some thoughts on how to balance self-care and renewal with deep dives into healing. With COVID and quarantine, been really challenging for some people. Someone was sharing not too long ago how she was so excited about having her family back for such a long period of time. And she thought, I want to do it right. We're going to have meals together. We're going to have conversations around the table. And she was so excited. And then she said that excitement slowly ran out as everyone who was also excited to be there slowly but surely reverted back to their worst selves. And that family system stuff, as you know, everyone's got everyone locked in. And it's very hard to change inside a system like that. But, I should also point out that a lot of people are thriving during these times of COVID. As one introvert said, I've been preparing for this my entire life. Some people who have income are saving money and enjoying what it's like to step back. And I think it's going to be amazing whenever this thing clears and we can re-engage, how many people have profoundly reset their introvert-extrovert balance. But to be sure, these times are super challenging for so many. There has been a huge surge of substance abuse disorders since COVID. Deaths have increased, relapses have increased. And it's a mirror of our stress in this culture. And it also points to the need to look at what it means to heal and to feel whole. And personally, when you sense there's something that's going on between you and feeling free or feeling happy, what do you do? Do you carry on? Do you ignore it? Do you stop? Do you be with it? I come from the German school of, if this rash is still there in 2 weeks, I'm committed to casually mention to someone in an offhand manner. But truly, if you start really paying attention, like in meditation, when you start practicing moment to moment awareness in the body, you're going to notice two things. And one of them is good news. You become much more sensitive. The other is bad news. You become a lot more sensitive. And beyond a headache or beyond passing colds or disturbances, what we feel on the inside quite often, or what we sense below the line of awareness, are all these unseen, unfelt forces. And this is what the practice is designed to do. It's designed to reveal what's between you and your true nature. But of course, we have a tendency to override and not feel. And of course, what's stressing us out these days is when we feel under threat, when there are not enough resources, not enough money, not enough time, not enough energy, not enough attention or affection. Incredibly challenging times. Last week I talked about spiritual bypass, how our baked-in resistance to what is arising is often in the name of spiritual idealism. We have very, very clever ways of avoiding what's arising or avoiding the void itself. But if you want to feel more whole, you have to be brutally honest about how you are not feeling whole. It doesn't mean you become a hypochondriac, constantly scanning for disturbances in the force. But when something arises, this practice is about the art of turning your attention toward it, sensing it, examining it. About 25 years ago, can't believe it's been 25 years ago, but right about 25 years ago, I remember distinctly at one moment reaching for a third beer and asking myself, what's going on? Because I knew there was some self-medication going on there. And this voice said, your marriage is over. This little voice said, your marriage is over. That was a turning point. It took time to really integrate that. But it was so powerful, that moment of really asking, for whatever reason, asking myself, what is this all about? And those words of wisdom came through. I have a good friend who's a chiropractor, and he said so many times, people will come into his office bent, doubled over in pain, saying, I don't know what happened. I just dropped my toothbrush and I bent over to pick it up. Often, any moment of stress or suffering that grabs your attention is part of a long string of events. It wasn't just that toothbrush. It was an imbalance that had built up over a long period of time. So part of meditation and mindfulness is about sensitizing yourself to what's really happening. And when you do that, you begin to sense these unseen and unfelt forces. A practice that I've found really, really helpful. This is from Eugene Gendlin, who created focusing. And it's called clearing the space. It's a simple practice of asking certain questions, or actually a specific question. And if you'd like, I'd like to kind of lead you through this. It'll be just for a few minutes. The question that we're going to explore is, what's between you and feeling happy? Now, what I'll be doing is I'll be asking you the question, and you'll ask that question internally and just allow one thing to come up. And you might just note it to yourself. If you're alone, you might even speak it aloud and just say hello to it. And then imagine you could just take the concern for that to the side and just place it to the side. Not like it goes away, but you're taking the concern for it to the side. Sometimes when I do this and I ask, okay, what's between me and feeling happy? It might be, I need more caffeine. I feel undercaffeinated. I say hello to that and just place that to the side. And then again, when I ask what's between me and feeling happy, there might be something like, I can just sense this background anxiety everywhere I go. Say hello to that. Place that to the side. So, if you like, again, we're just going to do a few rounds. Close your eyes. Take a few moments just to sense this breath on the inside. Take a moment just to sense everything that's changing in your life right now. What's falling away, what might be calling you forward. And allow yourself to respond with just one thing that comes to mind. In your life right now, what's between you and feeling happy? And in your own way, say hello to this. Let it know you see it. And then gently slide that to the side, the concern for that to the side. And again, pausing, clearing. What's between you and feeling happy? Let this know you see it. Imagine you could slide that to the side. And then again, just sort of opening, kind of clearing the mind and noting what arises with the question, what's between you and feeling happy? And can you say hello to this? And gently place the concern for that to the side. And then again, what's between you and feeling happy? And say hello. Let it know you see it. And gently slide that to the side. And one final time, in your life right now, what's between you and feeling happy? Say hello to this. Let it know you see it. And imagine you could place the concern for that to the side. And take a moment just to sense now. What do you feel right now? What do you notice? Is it possible to sense who you are as the one who is aware of what it is that's between you and feeling happy right now? If you like, you can deepen your breath. If you like, you can open your eyes. I love this practice because quite often it begins to help me recognize what's below the line, and sometimes, certainly not all the time. You know what it's like when you wake up in the morning and you wake up and you feel really, really clear, but then all the programs start booting up. And before you get your feet on the floor, you're already kind of amped up in a stress mode. Sometimes I'll just lie in bed and I'll ask that question. What's between me and feeling happy right now? And it'll help me kind of recognize, oh yeah, there's this phone call I have to do today. And oh, that's right. I've been pushing back that project that needs attention. And sometimes just naming it can be really, really helpful. Some people notice that after doing this for a while, they kind of get a sense of like, wow, other than these issues, there is a sense of happiness here. And sometimes it can feel like an endless laundry list, but nonetheless, what the practice can do, this little technique can do, is help you sort of name what's present. Because quite often we don't name it. We stay too busy. We override the signals of upset for whatever reason, whatever form of spiritual bypass or simply an unwillingness to sense and name and feel what's here. In the movie, oh gosh, what's the name of the movie? So one of those Schwarzenegger movies. These guys out in the woods chasing whatever, or being chased, and all with their machine guns and so forth. And someone, one of the guys in the company says to another guy, says, "Hey, you're wounded, man." And the guy says, "I don't got time to bleed." We all have that attitude, that sort of macho attitude of just, it's just a flesh wound, keep going. But there's another kind of warrior mentality. And that's the warrior mentality around being free. It's the warrior mentality that is all about generating piercing insights into the nature of reality. There's one prayer, and it comes from the yogic system. It's the most brutal prayer in the world that I've run across. And the prayer goes something like this: Lord, burn what can be burned, drown what can be drowned, and cut what can be cut. For I want to know what it is that cannot be burned, cannot be drowned, and cannot be cut. Like it or not, we've all signed up for that. And if you are practicing meditation or mindfulness or have a desire to wake up, that's what you've signed up for, is to become more aware of where you're caught. And when you have a deep sense of that desire, show me where I'm false in my views of reality. It's kind of like the universe says, okay, you ready for this? So how do we practice? How do we be in this investigation of what's between you and feeling happy? What's between you and feeling free? There's a great quote from Abraham Lincoln, who said that if he had 4 hours to cut down a saw, or cut down a tree, he would take 3 hours to sharpen the saw. This is where mindfulness comes in, of recognizing the optimal conditions that are going to support you with your goal of where you want to be. So sometimes when things arise that are really difficult and challenging, it's important to recognize we can't be with them. Have you ever had a moment when you realize you have to kind of bracket what's arising? And by bracketing, it's almost like you're putting brackets around the experience, like, this is really, really unpleasant, but I do not have time to deal with it right now. So I'm going to put brackets around it, and maybe another time, but now is not the time. It's an important part of being with this awareness of what's between us and feeling free. I remember in college, a professor told me how he was with his girlfriend and they were crossing the George Washington Bridge outside of New York City, which, if you've never been on the George Washington Bridge, it's pretty intense. It's 2 levels and everyone is on their way somewhere. The car died right in the middle of the lane. And he said how he turned to his girlfriend and he said something along the lines of, I am not enjoying what our culture says a man's job is right now. Stuff comes up and we really, really don't want to deal with it. And I would imagine in those moments in the middle of the George Washington Bridge, he was not going to stop and kind of process his angst around how he was feeling about what was going on. He had to get on it. And we all have to do that. So bracketing is kind of a neat little concept. I see this, I get that it's going on, now is not the time. And there's the phrase which I use or maybe overuse, and it has to do with this in meditation, when you're cultivating the sense of non-judging awareness. You're holding the space for whatever needs to arise and exploring your relationship with it. And sometimes these things arise from below the line of awareness. We don't even quite know what they are. But this is the analogy, is that these elements, they're like wild animals at the edge of the woods. Have you ever had that experience where you're in the woods and you see an animal and you pause? You can't seduce the animal in, but you can let it know you see it. And that's a moment of connection. I see you. And I get that this is not an intimate relationship, but I'm aware that we are aware of each other. That is such a cool moment. So if you are practicing and you feel a kind of a wave of grief, or a wave of deep sadness, and it's there and it kind of presents itself at the edge and then it's gone. There's something so powerful around, I want you to know that I see you. And I get that I can't chase you down, I can't hold you closer, but I'm here. And it sets up a very intimate relationship with all these unseen and unfelt forces. Because you are being present and saying, I'm here to the best of my ability. My intention is to be present. So, how to set the optimal conditions to kind of do that investigation? Well, I think that there are a couple things. First, externally. Externally, it's important we feel safe to do this kind of inner work. It's important we feel supported. And sometimes you can feel supported by the practice itself. Sometimes you can feel supported by trusting that this practice of investigation, of self-healing, is you're part of a tradition and practices that can bring up a sense of faith or a sense of confidence. Sometimes it's helpful to be supported by another person. We realize I can't do this alone. And that's an important acknowledgement. But you can also explore the internals. What are the internal optimal states that allow you to do this investigation into feeling more whole in your life? And this is where it's fascinating to see the articulation of the 7 factors of awakening. And I just thought I would mention these because they're kind of curious and some of them are a little surprising. But when you think about it, setting the internal optimal state draws on these qualities in many ways. So 7 of them. The first is mindfulness. You can think of awareness as non-judging awareness, or what it's like to maintain awareness of reality. Of course, as you know, that's a delicate state because the mind is always moving into aversion or moving into attraction. And so mindfulness is that sense of openness. Let me be open to what is here. Let me be aware of my tendency to move away from pain and move toward pleasure. The second quality is this quality of investigation. And this is a quality of curiosity. Like I really want to know more about this. What is this? That quality of a real intense curiosity is the opposite of trying to control your experience or trying to push it away or trying to disassociate. It's like, so what is this? That sense of curiosity or investigation is directly tied into this next factor of energy, of vitality. Because when you're doing this inner work, when you're taking the time to slow down and pause and do a deep dive into what's arising, to see into the nature of reality behind anything, whether it be physical unpleasantness or emotional disturbances or mental states, you need gas in the tank. You need firepower to do this. So that sense of energy, vitality, and effort is required. But this is where it all gets a little bit paradoxical, because you need energy, but you also need a sense of relaxation. You have to stay relaxed to allow the energy to move, to allow intuition to flow. And again, paradoxically, there's this very interesting relationship between relaxation and concentration. Because you need to be relaxed, but at the same time, you have to develop your capacity to stay present, to stay focused. And the final of these states is equanimity, to accept what's here as it is. So let me review these, because it's a lot of components that go into this investigation. Mindfulness, non-judging awareness, the capacity to investigate, a real sense of curiosity, of energy and determination, relaxation, and at the same time, one-pointedness. And finally, a quality of acceptance, a quality of receiving. Now, what I've noticed for myself is if one of these factors isn't there, it's not the optimal state. And the primary one that many people run into, and certainly I do as well, is energy. You might be aware of a strong emotion or some unpleasantness, and you might recognize, I just don't have the firepower to stay with this. And that's an important thing to recognize. And so much of this is tied into heightening your awareness around trauma. And there's a lot to talk about trauma, but in essence, I view trauma as the simultaneous arising of fear and helplessness. And when you feel fear and helplessness, all these qualities can be lost. You lose your capacity for mindfulness because you're in a state of self-preservation. And either you're going into fight, flight, or freeze. You can't investigate what's there because there's so much upset. The energy is all designed to move you away from what you're feeling. So you can't relax, you can't concentrate, and you can't stay open to what's there. So again, noting that when something arises and it has this quality of something traumatizing or triggering, where you feel fear and you feel helpless, it's so important to learn some of the techniques of how to work with trauma, with mindfulness. And I'll talk about this more in a future talk. But in essence, a lot of it is around resourcing, finding a way to be with it. And sometimes the way to be with it is not to be with it, to turn your attention elsewhere. But I'll talk a little more around finding a resource state in the body itself, where you can actually stay not with it, but near it. So powerful, so juicy. I'll talk more about this in the future, but if you're interested in this, there's a lot of beautiful material out there. When it comes to investigation, setting the stage. We have these 7 factors of awakening, but I really feel that one of the most powerful states to cultivate is sincerity. Like that deep, sincere intention to learn from this, to be with it. You know, it's never a good time to be with something really unpleasant. You know, I've never had the experience of like, now would be the perfect time for me to investigate this deep, abiding sense of childhood shame. It's just not there. Usually, when I'm practicing intensively, it's like, oh God, not this, not now. But this is where the practice engages. When there are times when you say, okay, let's have tea. I'm going to have tea with this demon. And this is where the practice of rain comes in, of recognizing, allowing, investigating, nourishing, and resting in presence. And just to review briefly, because I know so many of us are familiar with this. And when something arises that's between you and feeling happy, or between you and feeling free, or between you and feeling really, really good, the first step is to recognize it. And here, simply ask, can you name it? Sometimes you'll feel a shift when you can just say what it is. This has happened to me countless times when there's something here, I don't know what it is, it's a wild animal at the edge of the woods, and I'm kind of sensing, gosh, so what is this? And I'm like, oh, this is sadness. And it'll be, sometimes there's a little somatic click, like, oh, you see me. And that can be a really powerful shift. Once I was exploring an issue with someone in a one-on-one, and we're kind of talking about all the dynamics, and this very high-powered business guy, and I asked him if he could sort of like summarize, like just sort of name the issue. And he closed his eyes, and for a long period of time he was quiet, and then he said, "This is shame." And then he burst out in tears. And just the naming of it was a release. It doesn't happen all the time, but if you can name it, as the shamanic traditions say, if you can name a fear, you take its power away. I don't know if that's totally true, but sometimes it is. So after you've recognized it, you've sort of named that wild animal at the edge of the woods, then the question is to ask if you can allow it, if you can accept it. And here, this is something people tend to overlook. Because there's a sense of like, I should be bulldozing my way through this. Or I want to nuke this, so let's go. But you have to really ask yourself, can I be with it? Can I allow it? And sometimes you can't. Sometimes you're triggered. Sometimes it's too much. Sometimes you feel like you might get lost or re-traumatized by looking at it. You might not have the firepower. You don't have the energy. You might just feel too anxious to be with it. You might feel like, you know what, I want to be with it, but I need help. I can't do this alone. And that's such a critical thing to acknowledge for many of us, that it might be too much by itself. If you do have the sense that you can't be with it, the most strategic thing you can do is turn your attention elsewhere. Again, bracketing. I see you. I acknowledge you. My intention is to be with you. Now's not the time. Super powerful. Then we're into the investigation. My time has flown, so a little bit on investigation. The primary investigation is somatic. Anything you are exploring, the issues are in the tissues, to be with it. And I'm so amazed at what it's like, at least for me and with many people I know, to make a direct energetic connection to how that lives on the inside. Find its location, sense its shape, sense that there's a color to it, and just sense, can I be with it? Can I just hang out with it? I got trained in Reiki decades ago. And if you're not familiar with Reiki, it's basically it's Reiki is universal healing energy. And so that sense of, can I just hold it in this sense of universal healing energy? Sometimes there's a sense of like, okay, I'm gonna pretend I'm sitting on a park bench with this feeling, and we're just gonna hang out. It's so fundamental, and so much occurs when you can simply be with what's there. But you can then nuance the investigation. You can sort of sense if there are emotional words that are in there, and look for resonance. Oh, this kind of feels like, oh, this is anger. Well, go back into that resonant feeling and ask, is that the right word? And it may not be. You may find that anger is actually disappointment. Or anger may be closely associated with a sense of deep sadness or hopelessness. Your investigation can also move beyond just the somatic, and you can actually explore the thoughts themselves. When you can ask yourself, what am I believing? What's the core belief here? Much to explore there. Explore those core beliefs. You can take your moment and trace it back. This getting familiar with, this having tea with what is there, so critical in practice. And of course, this is part of the wisdom part of the practice of just seeing it clearly. And the other element, which now we need to call on, is this quality of loving presence. And this is where, like I say, every time I lead a loving kindness meditation, I always say, this is like jazz. You've got to keep improvising to keep it alive. And here the question is, how do you access loving presence? For some people, they've got a pretty good sense of what it's like. Others, not so easy. For some people, they have to imagine, okay, if a really good friend was feeling this, how would I feel toward them? And could I apply that feeling to myself? For others, it's imagining that there was someone someone they really, really love, and imagine that person really loving them and sort of taking that in. And again, here you need to get really, really creative. My mother, who was kind of a New Age fundamentalist, that's how I used to describe her, that she would do this whole visualization where she would imagine a team of healers from the spirit dimension kind of supporting her and doing psychic surgery on her. And that can be a really interesting thing, just to imagine. Can you just imagine some quality of loving presence directly for you, holding this in love and kindness and empathy and compassion and that universal healing energy? Finding a way that you can connect to loving presence will be the lubrication that allows you to navigate anything. And of course, after doing the investigation, if anything shifts, when you notice any kind of a felt shift or any kind of a shift in attitude, what you're really exploring here is there's a shift in identification. Something let go. And again, it's so important to take time to simply rest in presence. Just simply be in that space of allowing. And that's where sometimes there can be very powerful integration that occurs in your investigation. So I'm glancing over at the time, and I'm only through part 3. So I'll have to pick up part 4 later. We have just a few minutes left. So I want to just say a few things in closing, and we're gonna close with a little meditation. The bottom line is, when you are feeling stress, when you are feeling anxiety, when you're feeling something, anything between you and feeling free, feeling happy, how do you know when it's time to lean in? Or how do you know when it's time to make popcorn and watch a movie? The question seems to come down to asking yourself this: how does this want me to be with it right now? And to listen deeply. That, in many ways, is a beautiful entrance into awareness. Because you're calling on both wisdom and compassion. How does this want me to be with it right now? As the Buddha said, allegedly, be a light unto yourself. Walk your own path. No one's going to save you. That you have to take responsibility for your own awakening. With all the myriad techniques out there, with whatever arises, that question, how does this moment want me to be with it right now, can begin to open your intuitive faculties, to open this higher sense of wisdom, the highest quality of loving presence, to help to guide you forward. Let's close with a little reading and a short meditation. This poem I'm going to read uses the word God all the way through. So I'm going to take some editorial privilege here and substitute the word presence. If you like, you can close your eyes. Take, if you like, 3 slow and smooth, deep breaths. Reflecting on the following words. Let presence love you. Be silent. Be still. Alone. Empty. Before presence. Say nothing. Ask nothing. Be silent. Be still. Let presence look upon you. That is all. Presence knows. Presence understands. Presence loves you with an enormous love and only wants to look upon you with that love. Quiet. Still. Be. Let presence love you. You might sense in these final moments, acknowledging the quality of presence right now. And is there a sense of how this moment wants you to be with it right now? Listen. As you're ready, you can slowly deepen your breath. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes. Thank you so much for taking the time to practice together. Thank you for your generous listening. May you and presence have a wonderful evening and beyond. Thank you, and many, many blessings in your practice and in all things.